Hello there, yeah, this is from the Fringes. My name is Jack Phelan. The opinion voiced on this show, they are our own opinions. How's it going, Steve?
Good, thanks, Jack. How about yourself?
Oh, very good. Right, first of all, I'd like to just touch on political issues. It's the meth which is destroying our society, decriminalise sex and educate the scene on health in terms of the marijuana. Where do you sit when it comes to marijuana?
Well, I guess the question for me personally is, where do I sit on methamphetamine? And methamphetamine is destroying our society, and it's the biggest elephant in the room. And the successive governments, in particular national, have completely failed the methamphetamine issue. And if anything is creating family violence, it has to be methamphetamine. And I personally believe that if we are going to have a safe and sound country, we need to look at other countries around the world like the Philippines, Thailand and Indonesia that take a very, very dim and harsh view on anybody that's manufacturing or distributing methamphetamine.
Yeah. Okay, now the Greenies attacked by Labour for wealth tax. New Zealand First is focusing on elder abuse.
You mean New Zealand Second, Jack?
Right. Hey, Opportunities Party, could they sponsor or promote our cause for Families for Justice? What do you reckon?
Well, as a organisation in the community, we have taken a non-political stance, although we do have a preference to any political organisation that promotes the best interests of families. Sadly, we don't agree with all of the organisations, political organisations, but we do support the view of the Maori Party. The only thing is we would like that to be for all children, all races, all colour, because we don't want to be left with Oranga Tamariki and suffer, sadly, like our Indigenous people in New Zealand have suffered, at the hands of hopeless and useless state employees working for a criminal and corrupt outfit like OT.
Yeah, now the Maori Party candidate, Donna, stood against the Peacock development, which is shutting down Shore's bird sanctuary. And the other day, there were 4 arrests out there at Peacock's development area. So I've been interviewing a few Maori people on my show and saying that they shouldn't shut down the bird sanctuary. And they should actually move the road up about 500 metres. So Donna is actually confirming what I've already said a few times. But do you reckon the Maori Party has some good policies when it comes to looking after family?
Well, they want to get rid of Oranga Tamariki, so I'm all for that. Yep. There does need to be a child protection unit, but it doesn't have to look anything like Oranga Tamariki. And quite frankly, social development, which is the Ministry of Social Development, should actually be doing their job properly and giving people a hand up that need it. And should be focusing all those resources there, rather than, all we've seen over the last 40 years is absolute tragedy being conducted by the state. Whether, the Royal Commission on Sexual Abuse and State Care just points it out very clearly with the amount of people coming forward with their stories. That also happened with Lake Alice, and it's also happening today with Oranga Tamariki. It's got to stop.
Now, with child care state abuse, I'm hearing story after story of even men that have been played around with in their childhood and have gone through extreme trauma, and there's been nothing for them there to help them deal with the real issues. So with the state care abuse of our children down through the past, 23 years, 20 to 30 years, has that been really addressed? Have they brought that out properly?
I don't think so. I think many of the NGOs are not doing a very good job, sadly. When you look at the difference between Man Up and Legacy and what they do for the community, and they take on some of the really, really difficult cases and have been very, very successful. I was disappointed in Vision. I thought that they could run a far more powerful campaign, because there is no doubt that one of the best organisations out there that is not funded by NGOs are those two, Man Up and Legacy organisations, of what I've seen. You know, some of these others are just hopeless. My friend.
Now, our protests on Monday, they were a success about New Zealand, and we had a few of our signs on TV1 and 3 articles in the paper, and I noticed when you rung up that Peter said, yeah, I'm included in that number that was protesting. My little boy was out there protesting as well.
Oh, my son loves it too. Yeah, well, we're in Wellington outside the head office, calling for the resignation of Grenier Moss. And the reason is very simply that no public organisation, Jack, could probably handle the scrutiny of 2 of the 5 reports that come out, and yet she's still there after 5. The reality is that the ministers are not listening to us, Jack, and it doesn't matter if it was red, blue or black. I mean, Martin didn't listen to us. Tolley was useless. Bennett was even more useless. And I can't see Labor as actually going to do any better. The reality is that we have to, we've realised that it's the bureaucrats that are running this corrupt organisation, and there is no choice left open to us but to actually address those bureaucrats directly. And of course we can do that through Brooker versus New Zealand Police Supreme Court of Appeal. And you know, it's just very clear to me that there is a serious major culture problem within Oranga Tamariki, which was really SIFS and's just been rebranded, and the culture and management within that organisation is rotten to the core from the top. And you know, even in the short time that I've had to do with SIFS and Oranga Tamariki, you know, some of the senior managers like Mark Posto, Julie Sutherland, Jan Patrick, Peter Hepburn, those kind of people, they're just there for their own employment opportunities, and they don't really have the children's best interests at heart at all. I mean, those particular people, of course, used my children in an international drug operation, Operation Phantom.
Right.
And you.
When I was protesting, I was saying the government is guilty of trafficking in children. 2, 4, 6, 8 politicians out the gates are lying. Our families are dying. And I was talking to Jamie Strange. We had a political prayer breakfast this morning. 250 Christians were gathered here in Hamilton, and they were praying about housing in the city here, God's solution to ensure our homes are affordable and safe, the election and the referenda, community, well-being of families and young people. But anyway, I asked Jamie Strange what he was doing about family law policy, that he should really focus on youth, parenting and family mediation. He had no answer for me.
Well, he probably doesn't have a clue what he's doing, because, Jack, with all respect to our Christian community,
Yep.
one of the investigations going on in the Royal Commission is faith-based sexual abuse. Now, New Zealand is a country, just like a lot of other countries around the world, that hear these rumours, that know this stuff's going on, and then cover it up. And they did this in New Zealand for a very, very long time, right? So that was faith-based care, right? Then there was the state care. We knew about that. We knew about Lake Alice, and that's been since 1970, where New Zealand was convicted of of torturing children using electrification on their genitals. Come on, man. What is wrong with the sheep? There's just too many people pretending that this isn't happening, and then when it happens to you, there's no support systems around you. And so Families for Justice, under the United banner, we've got all the little groups together, working together with social justice leaders from various parties and groups to look at raising awareness and convincing the community out there that the state is by far the biggest abuser.
Yep.
And when you come up against the... Sorry?
United Families for Justice nationwide protest media release calling for resignation of Granny Moss and management team, along with closure of OT offices. We're calling for a complete restructuring with emphasis towards inquisitorial and mediation-based alternatives.
Yep.
OT is lawless, corrupt, and tantamount to a criminal organisation with no accountability for abuse, destroying and traumatising families, a breach of international human rights with intergenerational failure. So what can you tell me about inquisitorial and mediation-based alternatives? What are you saying there, Steve?
Well, before we go on, I'd just like to express something that's very, very obvious.
Yep.
This has been going on for a very long time. The statistics when it comes to Maori are undeniable, that they have been targeted as low-hanging fruit.
Yep.
Right? And the state has only just starting to address it, but it's too late. The people have lost total faith in the ability of the state to actually deliver. You know, Jacinda Ardern and Crusher Collins say they want to protect the children, but they continue to forget that the state is the biggest abuser by far. And, you know, New Zealand is not a safe place for children, let alone protective parents. Because when you come up against the state, you're coming up against the all-of-government approach. You're coming up against OT, the police, the Child Protection Unit, which fabricate evidence on behalf of OT, which then go along to the family court and get a rubber stamp because the judges don't listen to the parents, who should be able to get a fair trial, and only listen to the professionals, which are fabricating the evidence. You know, honestly, it's and then you've got the DHBs, and then you've got the education people, and all of those people with a vested interest that do not really understand what is going on within families at all. And I'm just tired of it.
Marius Rucker was actually online. He's supporting our right in New Zealand, demonstrations around the country. They like our spirit. Justice is not free. Now we need to file in the UN, taking a class action. What can you tell us about some of the solutions? Shouldn't we be filing in the UN? Shouldn't we be challenging these politicians? What do we want to see put in place for family law policy here in New Zealand?
Oh, well, that's a big topic. And we do have solutions. I mean, 50-50 shared care should be statutory for a start, unless there is domestic violence or there is methamphetamine or mental health issues, right? Yeah. That would go a very, very long way to resolving a lot of the issues. The second thing is the longest enduring agreements between people is a mediated agreement. And the lawyers don't want to do mediation because they cannot extenuate the conflict and make loads and loads of money. You know, there's far too many milking the system. I think National did try to address it, but Amy Adams got it totally wrong and flawed, and you know, just went along with the lawyers. I mean, one of the things that's very clear to me in New Zealand is that the Law Society needs to pull up its socks because it's self-governing, and that the government has got to come in and hold these people to account, because some of the scurrilous situations that are going on between judges and lawyers, and of course, remember, judges were lawyers, is a very serious problem. When you get injustice in society, you're eventually going to get people who are going to push the boundaries of lawfulness.
Yeah. But I deal with so many families where you see fathers end up being separated from their own children, and the mother's taking court action against the father, and there's a massive big split and argument. If they reconcile, it's by making it mandatory reconciliation for both mum, dad, and the children. They can all work it out with one another. I mean, this is what I do with Peter, and his mother, I work it out with her. So we do need shared parenting and family mediation. So you're telling me that the lawyers are milking it. You're telling me that the state is responsible, these bureaucrats, the lawyers, and social development and so forth, that they're making heaps of money out of it.
Well, honestly, the quality of family court lawyers in New Zealand is a pigsty. Honestly, of what I've seen of the work going on by family court lawyers in New Zealand, they should be bloody well ashamed. So I would say 90% of the people that I see lose their children because A, they don't understand their case, and you know, it's way outside their normal lifestyle to be fighting major court cases in the family court or the high court or the court of appeal to get justice. And the rest of the reason that people are losing their children are useless, hopeless lawyers that are not doing even remotely the job that is often required, and the judges that are basing everything, or much of it, on personal opinion and not the law. You know, Section 5E of the Care of Child Act is very clear. The non-custodial parent must be supported. But often I see judges banging non-custodial parents over the head all the time. They're not encouraging more contact, they're actually reducing it. And so, you know, what's going to happen? You're going to have a parent that will end up having trauma, mental health issues, physical health issues, a lot. You know, having a relationship with a human being in New Zealand when it goes wrong is a very, very dangerous, unhealthy business to be in.
Yeah. Now, we're part of an international group called Punish for Protection, joining families around the world, fathers, mothers, and grandparents, as their children are uplifted. And we're a non-gender biased organisation, aren't we?
That's correct.
We're focusing on men transforming women, women transforming men.
Yeah.
And there are no support services for fathers and mothers who've had their children stolen, no grief counsellors and sort of things. So there's been a lot of...
No, they're punished. They, you know, even the innocent ones are punished by Oranga Tamariki in the family court.
Yeah.
And so, no, the only support service systems we've got is, you know, groups like ourselves that get together as a community to network, to allow people to understand that they're not alone and they're not the only people out there going through this hell. And that we, you know, even though we're a voluntary group, we try our best to support people where we can. But, you know, far too often we're seeing people wanting to commit suicide because, or get major depression because they're removed from their biological children.
So this year, Families for Justice in our protest, how many officers were we protesting outside?
Well, I think we.
What do you think this?
I think we got up to 38 officers around Oranga Tamariki, around New Zealand. I think that a lot of people were initially scared to come out and protest because, Oranga Tamariki is a vindictive pack of little rats, and they'll target you if you stand up to them. But I think that, the history of Oranga Tamariki, SIFs and social welfare over such a long period of time, over 5 reports, and there's probably been about 20 over the last 10 years, the Royal Commission on Sexual Abuse, there is definitely a groundswell of people slowly starting to come to understand that the state is the biggest problem here.
Yeah. Okay, now, what about our politicians?
Oh, they're bloody useless. Oh, God, seriously, the quality of politicians in New Zealand is appalling. Really, one thing I'll say for what's going on in the political realm at the moment, in my professional view, is that there is a groundswell of real, passionate, smart people in the smaller groups that are starting to stand up and realise that the only future is you have to go into politics. But they're going to come up against the political machine of the people that are professional politicians. And the problem you've got there is that they're all controlled by the party whip. And so people are not able to give their personal opinion or actually really represent the feelings and emotions of their constituents. And so I think that hopefully, and I hope, that over the next election, that a group of independent people who are not going to be controlled by party whips will form a group that New Zealanders can get behind. But the one thing is, you've got to have people you can trust. You've got to have people that have got experience. It's a wilier world, the world of politics.
It's all controlled by the UN at a top level with elitism and so forth, and they make too much money out of it. Therefore, the politicians are not going to change it.
Well, I do think that New Zealanders are becoming concerned that we're being financially influenced by other agendas outside of the country. I think that some of the newspaper reporters are actually starting to dig in the right directions. I don't know that it's come out.
Yeah, we need alternative media, because on TV they only like jokes carry on and they tell us what they want us to know. And they're supporting facial recognition and all, like the new 5G and COVID-19 agenda. But are they really representing the people and really walking a mile in our shoes and representing our families?
Well, I think that's what everybody should be asking, and then they should vote accordingly.
Now, what about bothering? We used to do it as the Father's Rights campaign movement with Terry Bevan and Jim Bagwell years ago. Naming and shaming and bothering just outside little.
Well, I think this is going to continue to grow. I think that the government has to understand that the citizens have had an absolute gutsful of the lawlessness being conducted by state employees, although we wish to be lawful, we're obviously going to have to vote with our feet, and we're going to have to bring it to the door of these individuals that are masterminding this abuse of us. And of course, we'll have to be careful and lawful, which none of us have a problem with. But we're very lucky that we've got Brooker versus New Zealand Police Supreme Court of Appeal, which says that we're entitled to protest. Because
what about filing in the UN and taking a class action with a number of cases?
Well, you can't do a class action. You can't do a class action with the UN, but we are already filing data with the UN about children, so that the UN gets a clear view of what is really happening in New Zealand, rather than getting a political view, which is a clean whitewash, which we've seen that in over 30 odd years with regards Lake Alice, which was a terrible cover up by successive governments. And it's an absolute disgrace from the taxpayers' point of view that Crown Law spent over 20 million defending the actions, these criminal actions, and not trying to, as a state organisation, administer justice. It's absolutely mind-boggling to me.
We need to stop the brutal treatment of our families and the major violations of the United Nations Covenant of Civil and Political Rights. Article 15 outlines the state's responsibility to protect our families. Therefore, we have a cause there internationally on that issue, and there are major breaches of the treaty. Article 10.2 of the Treaty of Waikato talks about chiefs and families thereof. So we could actually take class actions against New Zealand, couldn't we?
Well, you've got to, you're getting in the realms of legal technicalities here, Jack. And I'm just a victim and a father who was trying to protect my kids. I have learned a lot. I think that rests with people with better experience than me, people like Ben Keith or people like Michael Ferris and CCHR, those kind of people. And I think that they are, even though they're under-resourced, they're doing a pretty good job trying to get this out there. I mean, New Zealand is not a safe country to be a parent nor a child. And but either of the women who are vying to be Prime Minister of New Zealand at the moment, for them to say anything less than New Zealand is not a safe place is just not true. And they have to look at some of the behaviour of state employees in this role, because they're causing a lot of the problems too.
Now, where do we go from here, Steve? Like post-COVID-19, post-election, what are your solutions what is going to be good?
Well, I'm going to make sure that we try and continue to work with other groups, other leaders, to continue to bring our concerns to the public, because I think the public is the people that are going to sway things, because politicians rely on the public, and hopefully get the support of the citizens of New Zealand that we're actually doing this in the best interests of our kids.
Work at the groundswell, the man and the woman, more groups need to get involved, and we need to take it to a higher level, protesting outside judges' homes, I guess, and challenging the political arena.
Well, I just no longer trust the politicians, and I think in general most New Zealanders feel the same, at least from the people I've spoken to. So we can't get these politicians to do what we want at all.
We've got another 20 seconds to go. I'd like to thank you for coming on the radio, Steve Evans, the spokesperson for Families for Justice. Thank you very much for allowing me to interview you, and the best of luck down there in Wellington.
Thanks, mate.
Okay, thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye-bye.